Before starting this video, I request you all to please like and subscribe as it really motivates me a lot. The story commenced, and it was observed that the castle was engulfed in flames. Amidst the fiery backdrop, it was noticed that numerous soldiers were severely injured, lying motionless on the ground with blood thoroughly covering their bodies. Subsequently, a man was seen following another knight while holding a sword. The knight was heard exclaiming that the man should not approach any closer, addressing him as a monstrous entity. He insisted that someone of his nature was deserving of death and referred to him as a damned brat. However, the man was described as staring blankly at the speaking knight, his eyes void of emotion and his body exhibiting no movement whatsoever. Here was some additional context. The man in question was previously a minor antagonist in a novel centered around an unremarkable protagonist who had been reincarnated as a secondary villain named Christine. Following the reincarnation, Christine was reported to have faced immense difficulties in surviving and eventually became entangled in the narrative involving the heroine and the main hero of the original storyline. It was stated that the primary plot was derived from a story titled Guide Bus, but the principal flaw of that narrative was its intention for a general audience. Humanity was said to reside on a sky continent, a world that actively protected them. There existed transcendents who engaged in battle against monstrous creatures using extraordinary power, and a guide who maintained control over them to prevent them from being consumed by their own abilities. The novel's world was considered peaceful, if not for one individual. This transcendent was mentioned to have annihilated his entire family at the tender age of 12 and consequently received the title of Duke, the eminence grise, of that world. His name was Bernhard Lily Janice. Then, the man was reported to have spoken, remarking that Betty must undoubtedly be furious with him. He noted that she had even gone so far as to manipulate lowlifes such as the knight to act on her behalf. He acknowledged that there had indeed been disagreements between them but argued that such measures were excessive. He rhetorically inquired what others thought. Did they also perceive him as excessively cruel? The knight, visibly bewildered, was heard responding by asking what the Duke was talking about all of a sudden. The Duke continued, stating that others should consider his position as well. Would they feel pleased if someone spoke harshly and unpleasantly to them so directly? He expressed frustration, noting how she praised other men as being cool and handsome but apparently harbored dislike for him. He claimed she flattered the others with compliments. The knight was seen weeping as the Duke questioned what qualities those men possessed that made them superior, and then he erupted into maniacal laughter. He added that it was not that he found the situation humorous. While laughing ominously, he stated that he was sorry and must appear completely deranged. He then raised his sword and declared that he would promptly end the knight's suffering. Outside the castle, two individuals were standing. Betty stood in solemn contemplation, thinking that the scale of the escape operation had been substantial. They had even utilized rebel forces to evade that man, but it appeared that their efforts had not sufficed. Then, the Duke emerged, holding an axe in his hand. Betty reflected that the rebellion might conclude sooner, and more absurdly, than anyone had anticipated. Suddenly, a boy called out her name. He grasped her hand and assured her that everything would be all right. Betty thought to herself that at the very least, he was safe, and that fact alone was a relief. She acknowledged that he had always assisted her in carrying out her responsibilities. She then told the youth that they would certainly escape from there, away from that damned individual, without fail. The youth responded affirmatively, insisting that it would definitely happen. Suddenly, a girl called out to Betty, urging her to depart before it was too late. But Betty hesitated and replied that perhaps it would be better to return even now. The girl asked what she had just said. Betty expressed her gratitude for the girl coming all the way there and requested that she convey her thanks to the princess as well. The girl was shocked and exclaimed, calling her Miss Betty, asking whether she was truly intending to go alone. She warned that it was excessively dangerous to head to the mansion unaccompanied. Betty thought that even if she were captured in such a manner, she would remain safe, because the Duke would not be capable of killing her. However, she pondered about the others. She asserted to herself that her motivations were not rooted in kindness or righteousness. In fact, quite the contrary. She considered that even if she survived on her own, how long would she be able to stretch her limbs and sleep peacefully at night? She wished for an ordinary existence, one not haunted by persistent nightmares. She explained to the girl that if the Duke were to suppress the rebellion, he would undoubtedly come after her, and he would not easily forgive those who had taken his guide away. She asked the girl whether she was certain that she would not get caught. The girl began to sweat as Betty reflected that the Duke had obliterated the entire village's security unit. Escaping with 2 children while avoiding the monstrous creatures was an almost impossible feat. Layla, the trusted aide dispatched by the Duke's daughter to assist Betty, must have been fully aware of this fact. The girl then insisted that she could not leave Betty in such a location and declared that she would accompany her to the village and part ways thereafter. Suddenly, the Duke appeared at the scene and remarked how pleasant it was to see Betty again. He noted that despite having departed, she had returned to him. The youth stepped in front of Betty, shielding her, and warned the Duke not to approach. Betty appeared terrified. The Duke asked whether she was afraid of him, then acknowledged that he should have cleansed the bloodstains first. The youth, visibly irritated, pulled out a dagger and attacked him, but the Duke effortlessly dodged. The youth shouted once again for him to keep his distance. The Duke then grabbed him by the neck with ease, causing the youth to collapse. Betty cried out his name and rushed forward. The Duke explained that he had not killed the boy, as he knew she appreciated his presence. He begged her to return to him, no matter what might happen in the future. He asked her, "Okay, Betty?" and admitted he had been thinking about their fight. Upon reflection, he said, it all seemed insignificant. He attempted to reconcile with her, explaining that he had said hurtful things out of anger and that he sometimes blurted out inappropriate words without thinking. He acknowledged that he had a terrible temper but promised to work on it. He implored her to forgive him, claiming it was all his fault. Betty internally observed that the 18-year-old Duke lacked the maturity to apologize or articulate his emotions properly. His immense powers had earned him the noble title at the age of 12, but his young body had not been able to withstand such strength. As a result, he had received a terminal prognosis stating he would not survive into adulthood. He required a guide capable of managing his powers. The protagonist, who had an extraordinarily high compatibility with any transcendent, had been that guide, Christine. However, after being possessed, Christine had abandoned Duke Janice. It was natural, Betty reflected, who would willingly remain by the side of such a deranged villain. It would have been perfect if Christine had lived a joyful life with him, but instead, the Duke had become obsessively fixated on her after she left him for the male protagonist. With Christine gone, the Duke had reverted to being terminally ill. Eventually, he would lose control over his abilities and spiral into a destructive rampage. The collapse of the heavenly continent would follow, ultimately resulting in the extinction of all humanity. Therefore, it was deemed necessary that the Duke should lose control while he was still young, before reaching the full extent of his destructive power in adulthood. In this way, humanity might be preserved with minor sacrifices rather than being completely annihilated. Regrettably, Betty lamented, she had become his only dedicated guide, and now, she was the one who had to endure the consequences. Yet she vowed, one day, she would leave the Duke behind and live a life of her own. Greetings. I am Betty. Thus commences my second life, reincarnated within the pages of the novel Just a Minor Villain, as a completely inconsequential side character. This identity, Betty, was arbitrarily assigned to this body by the orphanage director when I was barely old enough to comprehend language. Such is the harsh, overlooked existence of those born as destitute commoners. I now serve in the duchy governed by His Grace, Duke Bernhard Lily Janice, the enigmatic, concealed antagonist of the original tale. Since the Duke exhibits an utter disregard for managing internal affairs, the estate has descended into organizational collapse. Employees depart in waves due to incessantly delayed wages, and the Duke is so indifferent that he can't even be bothered to sign a solitary approval document. Consequently, the few staff who remain often neglect their duties entirely. The fact that the estate would stoop to employing a mere 10-year-old like myself reveals the severity of the situation. But unlike this decaying duchy, I possess a resolute blueprint for my future. If I can withstand the conditions here for just one more year, I'll have sufficient practical experience to pursue a genuine career. My goal is to ascend the ranks in the estate's kitchen, one of the few semi-functional departments, and eventually become the esteemed head chef. Alternatively, working as a nanny is a viable path, and with further academic refinement, I might even secure employment as a tutor. So the eczema on my hands? Merely a trivial affliction in the grand scheme of my aspirations. One fateful day, I was sent to fetch water from the well. As I performed this mundane chore, I mused to myself, my future is brilliant. I shall endure. One day, this will all be worth it. Then, as if the gods were eavesdropping on my silent determination, the unthinkable occurred. A hand emerged from the dark waters of the well. Then a full figure rose up, soaked and spectral. He looked at me. I screamed, absolutely convinced it was an apparition, and swung my bucket at him in panic. Wait, why did he come out of the well? And then realization dawned. That person, that dripping figure, that's the Duke. And so began the downfall of Betty, the minor extra, who managed to ruin her own life at the tender age of 10. No, it's not over yet, I told myself, trembling. This is Duke Janice we're talking about, the pillar of the empire, the transcendent monster who, in the novel, annihilated his entire bloodline to obtain his title. Surely, a man like him wouldn't perish from a mere blow to the head with a bucket. No, he would undoubtedly rise from the depths and hunt me down. And when he did, I would be tortured until death. I must finish the job. Silence him before he has a chance to retaliate. But then another thought struck me. In narratives like this, isn't it standard procedure to aid the hidden mastermind upon first contact? I wanted to embody the compassion of the original heroine. Be gentle. Be good. A memory surged forth from the novel, a scene where the Duke looked at Christine and said during a duel, "Promise me you'll never abandon me. You said you liked me just the way I am." The memory faded. Back in reality, I found myself raising the pot to strike him again. Wouldn't it be more efficient to just eliminate him entirely? But then panic overtook me. If I'm caught, I'll be executed for murdering a noble. Grabbing only essential items, I dashed off in a frantic escape. Change your name. Leave everything behind. Never return. Behind me, I could already sense the Duke beginning to stir. Jewels can be tracked. Stick to cash, I thought with increasing desperation. Suddenly, a bloodied hand grabbed mine. I froze. He gripped me tightly and said, "That was utterly heartless. Tell me, how old are you?" Paralyzed with fear, I stammered. I'm sorry. So sorry. I should have finished him when I had the chance. That monstrous lunatic. Trembling, I tried to explain. I went to fetch water. My hand slipped. I had no idea you were in the well. Enough, he interrupted coldly. Then, with alarming ease, he hoisted me up like a sack of grain. If he discovers that the estate illegally employed a 10-year-old child, he'll explode with fury. I'm 14. I lied quickly. He raised an eyebrow. 14? But I'm 15. No, I meant 13. Yes, 13. He narrowed his eyes. 12. 11. He crossed his arms. Are you counting backward? Finally, he cried. I'm 10. 10 years old. At that moment, a maid entered the room. How long does it take to fetch water? She barked at me. Do you know how long you've been gone? The Duke's icy glare turned toward her. Startled, she bowed. Why, Your Highness? Call the butler, he ordered deadpan. She scurried away. He continued carrying me under one arm like I was nothing more than baggage. Attempted murder of a noble is a capital crime, I thought. I cannot let myself be caught. As I reached into my hidden emergency pouch, he commanded, "Stay still." Ignoring him, I pulled out a handful of herbs, bitter leaves my village pharmacist had told me to chew when terrified. "They'll make you fall asleep," she had said. "What are you chewing?" he asked suspiciously. "Spit it out. Immediately. Better to die with dignity than be executed," I resolved. Are you seriously trying to die? He growled. Spit it out while I'm still being merciful. No, I murmured as drowsiness overtook me. My entire existence was to care for others. I thought my intellect existed to protect people, but perhaps it was merely my own illusion. This time, I pray I may someday discard that golden throne and live a simple, humble life. Then I awakened.
I'm alive.
This room, so luxuriously decorated. Thick velvet curtains, intricate carpeting. This is a VIP suite. This must be the Duke's doing. A loud gunshot rang out from outside. What was that? My skin turned cold. I hurried to the window and saw him. The Duke. He was holding a gun, pointing it at someone in the garden. In that case, isn't that correct? He said menacingly. He's completely unhinged, I thought, trembling. Suddenly, the maid from earlier burst into the room. Betty, you're awake. What is going on outside? I asked. She immediately hushed me. Lower your voice. What happened? How long have I been unconscious? Does it matter? Get up, quickly, before we're caught. Are you hiding me from the Duke? I asked cautiously. The maid's lips curled. Can't you tell, you filthy orphan? My eyes narrowed. She always calls me that when she's in a bad mood. I need your help, she whispered, trembling. You're a good kid, aren't you? Good?
No.
Just powerless, I thought. Why me? Why leave such a perfect scapegoat behind? This has nothing to do with kindness. Suddenly, the Duke's voice rang out. I told you not to enter the castle. It's forbidden. The maid panicked. Your Highness, I'm so sorry. The little girl tried to run away, so I chased her. Is she awake? He asked, ignoring her. Yes, she just woke up. She was so fast I couldn't catch. I wasn't talking to you, he cut her off.
He looked directly at me.
She consumed twin-dried herbs, he stated. It takes time to detoxify. She may regain consciousness, but the dizziness might linger. There's a chance of permanent neurological impairment. Just listening to him makes me dizzy, I thought. Still, I think I can last a few more days here. He stepped into the room fully now. It's difficult to locate those herbs this season, he said. But mixing wingflower with semi-tree fruit can work as a treatment. Why is he telling and this? I thought suspiciously. But of course, he added, the fastest method would be to crack open the skull and inspect the brain directly. He flexed his fingers. Fortunately, one of my hobbies is medicine.
What?
He strode over to the chest I was hiding behind earlier, then broke it open with one hand. Wouldn't it be fascinating if I performed the surgery myself? He said calmly, crouching in front of me. Then, smiling faintly, he added, how interesting it would be. He's completely insane, I thought.